What is going on, Nuggets Nation NBA fans? My name is Tom Leuthner. Welcome back to Nuggets Today, presented by FanArch. We do have some things to talk about, and like I said, I believe last episode, 2 episodes ago, the off-season news is sort of fading out right now. We're sort of waiting on anything to happen, but I do want to give you guys daily content, so I do want to cover a few things I've seen throughout the off-season, whether it be a podcast or just something that has popped up on my feed or something I've talked about with somebody in the community. So the first thing I do want to talk about is something that has been sort of happening since the first day of the offseason. That is the Thunder speaking on the Denver Nuggets and how they have feared that the Nuggets were the only team to beat them in the playoffs. And I sort of agree, right? So we obviously saw Lou Dort talk about it. On one podcast, he was dressed up as a NBA referee, funny enough, when he was speaking about it. But he did say that they feared Denver were the only team that gave them the real shot, that they didn't know who was going to win going in. Isaiah Hartenstein, he did the same exact thing, talking about what team was going to give them the most problems. Now, I think it's super interesting that this is a team that last year went 11 guys deep realistically on people who could actually play basketball, even if those guys were, maybe 7-8 man on another team. They were players that can go in and make a difference at any point. Aaron Wiggins is a guy who we saw come in. AJ Mitchell is able to play basketball. He's a legit talent. So there was a team that went super deep against a team that went maybe 8 guys total deep, and those last 2 guys off the bench were like, okay, they weren't great. Obviously, we saw Russ get his minutes, Watson got his minutes, Strawther got his minutes, but we didn't see Strawther until the last 2 games of the series, or 3 games maybe. But I think it's super interesting that they were saying that the only team that they feared that would give them a real challenge is Denver. And I think that proves how good Nikola Jokic truly is and how good that team really played together, because we saw a guy like Hartenstein, who was on the Nuggets, come out and talk about it. And like I said, I think it's super interesting. I really do. I think that Denver didn't have a squad that other teams had. I think the Clippers went deeper than Denver did last year. I think, I wouldn't say the Lakers were as deep, but I think the Rockets were deeper than the Nuggets were last year. But I'm not downplaying the talent of guys like Strawther and guys like Watson. I just don't think that they were on the same level as a team like the Thunder. But talking about the depth, funny enough, Grant Hughes from Bleacher Report made his list of offseason grades, and Denver had a C. Now, I'm not sure how Denver had a C rating with a top 3 to 5 trade so far this offseason, acquiring Cam Johnson, signing back a fan favorite and a guy whose chemistry is already built up in Bruce Brown, signing one of the biggest spark shooting guards in the NBA off the bench, which is Tim Hardaway, and going to trade a guy they didn't play for one of the best backup centers in the NBA. How do you rate that a C? So I didn't get to see the entire list. I was just doing some digging on the Denver Nuggets, and that popped up. So I'm mind blown. Now, I think Bleacher Report, I don't want to say disrespects the Nuggets, but maybe they have something against them, because they came out with their top 100 player list, and I know his career isn't over, but Jokic was, I believe, 17 under Kevin Garnett. Jokic was, I believe there was 5, maybe 6 centers ahead of Jokic on that list. Now, maybe I'm biased, but I think that Jokic is easily a top 10 player right now. I think there are arguments that you can make, but I also don't think there's 5 centers who are truly better than him at what he does. You look at Jokic. This guy's a center who can come out. Maybe he's not as dominant as Shaq, but Shaq can't do the things Jokic can. Obviously Wilt is tougher because you go back and look at Wilt's stats, but Wilt was also able to grab the ball out of the air when his teammates shot it, and it was counted as a rebound. If you don't believe me, there's footage on it. Bill Russell, who is this amazing defender, you can go back and watch. They're putting clips in 4K. They are going ahead, fixing the resolution of clips of guys like Elgin Baylor going off in playoff games, or in finals games rather, and Bill Russell standing there. I mean, maybe Kareem is there, maybe Shaq is there, but Shaq's another guy. Couldn't succeed without Kobe or Wade. Was he able to get to the finals? Sure. You look at his career, I believe there was, in the span of 4 or 5 years, he was swept 3 or 4 times in the playoffs. Jokic has been swept once ever in the playoffs, and that's by the Suns team who were 10 times better than him, and Jokic was able to still attempt to put up a fight. So I don't see how Kevin Garnett is better than him, and I think Kevin Garnett is great. I don't even see Kevin Garnett over Jokic right now. And again, that might be fan bias, But that's what I have to say about that. Now, speaking about, how good Nikola Jokic is, I think that this is an argument for the best Denver Nuggets team we may have ever seen. And if not, it's pretty close. I know you can go back and look at the Melo Allen Iverson Nuggets. You could look at the Melo AI or JR Nuggets, which were all pretty close. The only thing I think Denver's lacking at this moment is the lack of point guard depth. And I think that, we've seen some things with people in the community saying that Denver may wait till the regular season to see how this team really performs before they go out and attempt to find a backup point guard. And I don't think that's a bad idea. I think if this is the crew that you're going to run with, go ahead and do so. Maybe they're saving that spot for somebody they think is going to prove themselves in the G League, whether that be Tamar, Curtis Jones, Spencer Jones, whether that be one of them. But like I said, I wouldn't be too mad if Denver does wait out until the beginning of the season or maybe a couple weeks in to actually go ahead and sign a point guard if guys like DeLon Wright are available, if guys like Campaign are available, if guys like maybe Monte Morris are available. We're not looking for a massive point guard upgrade like Damian Lillard or Chris Paul, even though they would be nice. We're looking for somebody who could come in and replace the Bruce Brown minutes if Bruce Brown is not running your backup one. But like I said, I think this is not, or is close to, if not the best Denver Nuggets team we've seen in at least the Jokic era. This team is put together phenomenally. You look at the replacement of MPJ, who's a catch-and-shoot guy, to a guy who, in Cam Johnson, who's a catch-and-shoot guy but can also score off the dribble. You look at a guy like Bruce Brown, who helped us win a championship. You look at a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr., which is a vet who can knock down threes. Last guy we saw do that was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and he was a starter who I think Tim Hardaway Jr. is close to his talent level, and he's off the bench. He's on a vet minimum. I mean, you can look at this. Again, Val is probably the best backup center Jokic has ever had. I mean, the other guys who are close to that are guys we are going to cover right now. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do something. It's a new segment I'm going to do. And on every Friday, it's appropriate, if I don't have any news to break or any topics to cover, I'm going to do my top 3 list. Talking about my favorite things. Today, I'm going to talk about my favorite top 3 role players. And again, this is my list. You guys don't have to agree with it. But I want to put up my honorable mentions. There's some guys I'm going to miss, obviously, in my honorable mentions, but just people that came to the top of my head. Robert Pack, old-timer, small guard, was able to throw it down ferociously. You look at a guy who's just like that, but was on the Nuggets as he got older, and that is Nate Robinson, another guy I want to throw in there. My 2 backup bigs were Plumlee, Chris Anderson, and then later on came to my mind DeMarcus Cousins, who is probably the second best backup Jokic has ever had if Val is as good as we think that he is going to be. Now, my top 3, I'm going to go with, this is close because it was between Aaron Aflalo and this guy. I went with my favorite role player for Denver, and that is Randy Foye. Now, Foye wasn't there for a good amount of time, but he was a shooter, man. This is a guy who I believe was taking like 5 attempts per game. He only had a short stint with Denver, but he was shooting close to 40% from the three-point line. This is a guy who actually, funny enough, back in old 2Ks, I used to dominate with him. Knockdown shooter. Got to give some respect to at least one of the shooters, and JR was also up there on my list, but he was more of a freak athlete when he was in Denver than he was a shooter. So my 3rd spot is going to go to Randy Foye. My 2nd spot is going to go to a guy who is so much fun to watch, and that is the Manimal, Kenneth Faried. I mean, how could you not love this guy? This guy was throwing it down on anybody, undersized power forward who was able to fly. Again, ferocious dunker, somebody who was legitimately fun to watch. It was almost like the value brand Aaron Gordon because he couldn't shoot, can't dribble as well, but man, that guy could get up. Now, my number 1 favorite role player, and I think I've talked about this before, I've worn the jersey on the podcast, and that is the backup center. He was in Denver for one of the Jokic stints, didn't play though, and that is JaVale McGee. He was a force. Now, it's funny, Shaq and a Fool legend, obviously, but this is a guy who is actually talented. You go back and watch, one of the best 3-point celebrations I've ever seen was JaVale McGee knocking down a 3, hitting the little cook it up, lick each finger after he hit. I mean, great. The guy was full of moments, but he was also full of highlights. Another guy who was a freak athlete, throwing it down. He should have won the dunk contest when he was in Washington. That's just my opinion. But I think he's easily my favorite role player in Denver. Am I saying he's the best? No, but I'm saying my favorite. My favorite player in Denver history. probably besides Jokic now, was hands down Andre Iguodala. I mean, the guy, that's what got me into basketball realistically. And when I first started watching, I was younger, but Andre Iguodala was the guy that came over to Denver. I was watching beforehand, but he was the one guy I loved in Denver, and I really felt so much passion towards this team when he came over there. They were able to make some playoff runs. I loved Gallo. I loved Mozgov, but JaVale McGee was my number one favorite role player in Denver. I know Iggy was more of a star than a role player. I think Ty Lawson may have been too, so I kept them off, but that is my favorite role player in Denver Nuggets history. Anyway, if you guys want me to cover anything, please leave that down below in the comments. That's all I got for you guys today, Nuggets Nation. I'll catch you guys tomorrow.